Hi, Victoria.
Thank you for joining me today.
I'm really excited about today's conversation.
I am extremely excited about today's conversation. We've spent the whole year breaking down different diseases, talking about biochemistry, talking about restoring health. And today we're talking about not just restoring health, we're talking about perpetual health.
Yes,
We are talking about immortality.
exactly.
And when I think of that word, I think of science fiction.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the concept of immortality has captured the imagination of humans from the beginning of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are books like The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and it's captured the concept of how is it possible to live forever? And
Mm-hmm.
what would that actually mean in the real world? And I think as the history has shown,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's quite a fantastical idea. But what's interesting is that the science, it's not such a far-fetched idea. In fact, it is truly a reality. And it's a reality that we will probably observe over the next few hundred years.
And it's not a reality that's due to one elixir
Correct.
or finding the fountain of youth and then just everyone lives forever. It's more of a different. Is it a different approach to health?
Exactly. Well, this whole idea of a one-time pill or
Mhm.
like you said, the fountain of youth, that's really infantile thought,
Mhm.
quite frankly. But if you actually look at human physiology and you think about what it is for a human to live and to function and ask the question, what are the barriers to maintaining and sustaining that function indefinitely?
Mhm.
And when you start breaking it down into its core component parts, you start realizing this is not actually outrageous at all. It's actually quite logical. It's actually quite probable in a sense that we have many situations where things can maintain function indefinitely. The human body, of course, is a complex organism, and we'll get into the concept of what people normally think of aging.
Mhm.
Aging is a really interesting concept because we don't really understand it. It's one of those things that we talk about all the time,
Mhm.
and it appears to have a meaning to it, but when you actually start digging into it,
Mhm.
there really is no meaning to aging. Same thing with death. People think of death as a thing that happens, and there's no such actual thing as death. Death is the absence of life. And from a scientific perspective, we talk about heat and cold, for example, right? And people think, oh, it's cold. I'm going to turn the air conditioning on because I want to get more. I'm going to add cold air.
Mhm.
Well, what you're really doing is you're moving heat. There's no actually such thing as cold. Cold is simply the absence of heat. And so that's the kind of concept when we talk about immortality
Mhm.
and we talk about aging and the loss of function or the loss of life.
Mhm.
It's really not, immortality, again, is not something that you actually get in the future. Immortality is something that you have right now. You just happen to lose function and eventually lose life.
So are you saying that immortality means that we don't have to age?
Right. Well, so you actually age forever. That's the whole point. Like, I laugh because, I did a lot of stupid things when I was young. So I don't really want to go back. Okay. I don't want to go back to my 20-year-old self. I want to kind of keep all my experiences and everything that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to age indefinitely. Okay. I want to continue to age and I want to continue to grow, learn more and more function, more and more tasks. I think what the goal of aging is to age forever and continue to push the limits of human functional capacity. And as we develop as a species, we develop tools. Like one of the things about humans is that we're tool makers. We make things. And those tools extend our capabilities. So our computers, they allow us to think at a larger level than we could just by ourselves. So a simple computer expands human functionality. Or you take a hammer,
Mm-hmm.
okay, just a simple hammer expands the human functionality of our activities.
I love how you keep using the word function because to me, when I think about health, I think about wanting to maintain function and wanting to be able to keep doing the things that I love doing, having the energy to do the things I love to do. I feel like health and function are kind of one and the same.
Correct. And so immortality, perpetual function, is basically it's the ability to be able to perform those functions necessary for your daily life forever.
Mhm.
And that sounds like a simple thing. It sounds, oh, I can just walk a mile every day or whatever it is. But that's, you have to understand, function doesn't happen in a vacuum. Function is a consequence of you adapting to an environment, right? And there's so many cliches that people don't really understand that these actually fall into certain functions. Like the old one, like, if you want something done, get a busy person to do it, right? Because a busy person has expanded their function. Okay, they have been able to learn, the days are active, and so they can actually get a lot done in a day. So their functional capacity in a day is quite large. And where someone who's not busy, nature abhors a vacuum. So what happens is, since you have extra time in a day, they end up taking longer and longer to do individual tasks. So a busy person might take 20 minutes to make lunch, and someone that's not so busy, they may take 3 hours to make lunch.
It's so true. When I was the busiest that I remember being, I was also in great shape. I was sleeping well and I was getting so much done because I only had 20 minutes to do that task. So I just got it done in 20 minutes because I had something to do. And it's kind of like momentum creating that momentum. And then once you have that, you're able to just maintain it and achieve more.
And but that didn't happen instantly, right?
No.
You didn't just wake up one day and be a busy person. Right. You kind of started, having a job, and then you had relationships, you had things. And so these things kind of gradually built, and you gradually became more and more capable over time, and your function expanded over time. The same thing happens in reverse. So all of a sudden you're a highly functioning person and you get sick, or you break a leg or something, right? So all of a sudden you can't actually do the things that you used to be able to do. So your function starts decreasing, and your functional capacity starts decreasing. So all of a sudden, okay, you now got your broken leg fixed, and you don't instantly have the same level of function that you had every day, because now you have adapted to this lower level of function. And this is where the really confusion gets in with aging and function, and this concept of this programmed life and programmed death. It's really adaptation. Humans adapt at the large level, like in our everyday life, but also at the organ level. Your heart adapts to the function that you put it into. Your cells adapt, and so it's going to adjust to the demands that you place upon it within the ability to do it. So even if you have a broken leg, no amount of wishful thinking and saying I'm going to you're going to lose function because you physically can't do certain things. And the same thing will happen at the biochemical level. That functional capacity, there has to be a driving force that enables you to actually systematically
So could you say that aging is then kind of the maladaptation to, a less maybe stimulating environment?
Exactly. We actually adapt to death. Okay. Our body actually doesn't, we don't program ourselves. Like we're not programmed to die. We actually teach ourselves to die. Like the body learns how to die. Okay. So as your function decreases, it adjusts it, right? And so it'll, as you walk less, so maybe your biochemistry is less, you've got malnourishment, or there's some other types of environmental stressors that have happened to you that have knocked down some level of function. Then your body now adapts to the lower levels of function. And then you lose another level of function. Then your body adapts to that lower level of function, and another one, and another one. And so eventually, okay, your body's adapting to these lower and lower levels of function. Same thing happens in reverse. If you restore certain levels of function and then put yourself in the proper environment, your function will continue to increase.
I want to go back to what you said about, you don't want to go back to 30-year-old self because, you've learned a lot since then, and how you want to continue aging forever.
Right.
I feel like that is so, I just wish we could put that on a billboard, because this whole anti-aging narrative that's out there is also kind of contributing to this learning to die that you're speaking about. We're told that we're going to have less energy, and that, the work will change, and all these different things are going to change as we get older. That's part of this narrative that's also teaching us how to die, like you were talking about. Right. And I was also reminded of, I remember back in high school, you'd have, You'd wake up at 6 a.m., you'd take the bus, you'd drive to school, you'd have 20 minutes of history or 40 minutes of history and 40 minutes of calculus, and then you'd have a quick lunch, and then you'd do this and this and this. You'd do all these different things. Then you'd go to a sport practice or dance or whatever. Then you do your homework, and then you go to bed and you do it all over again. And you're surrounded by people and you're connecting. And then you go on into the world, and then eventually all of these structured activities that are expanding you they slowly dwindle away at the same time.
Well, then also as you learn certain things and you become more efficient at certain things, then you do less.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a problem with our own educational bias. So as you become more functional in your job, for example, I can do the same job with less hours because I know my work. And so then as you educate yourself and as you become more adept at certain functions, that actually frees up time. And you need to fill that with new functions and new activities. Otherwise, you'll do the exact opposite. So when you're young and you're doing all these things, you're actively learning, you're actively seeking out, you're actively trying to find answers, and you're in that seeking behavior state. And then eventually you find certain things that you like and you get better at them. I always tell the example of, like, your brain is designed to simplify our environment. So the very first time you go to a university class, you walk in, you go, where am I going to sit? Right. And you got to pick, you got all these, you got 100 seats to sit in.
Yeah.
Right. And then so you pick a seat. Right. And then what happens is you sit in the same damn seat all semester. Well, why? Because it's less thinking. So you've had that first phase where you've had to make this huge choice. There's a lot of thinking involved or stress or whatever it was. And then once you've actually figured it out, then you just go to the same place every time. So it's less thinking, less stress. And so we're adapted to that level of higher functionality. So part of anti-aging or living forever is realizing that you have to continually be understanding this adaptive nature of human existence at the cellular level and at the behavioral level, is that you kind of have to learn how to unlearn things, because our own education, our own skill set kind of hamstrings us, because we have already known that, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of concept, right? And they become more and more restricted in their activities. So part of this immortality is constantly stressing and doing new things. Like when you're 85 years old, you should be thinking of what my next job is going to be. Okay, you shouldn't be retiring. Like retiring is basically putting a time limit on your death. Okay, which is the worst thing possible you can do.
It is kind of crazy to think about, right? Yeah. You're saving up a certain amount of money because there's in that way there's an end date.
I got these exactly. You got these X number of years to do things, right?
Yeah.
And really, you should be making more money every year and saving more money. Okay, so you shouldn't be there should never ever be a dwindling of your savings account fundamentally. Okay, mentally, like if you think about it that way, and same thing biochemically. So if you think of financially, you're saying, okay, I should be adding money to my bank account every single year. When I'm 95 years old, I should be making a profit. Okay, and that means that you are continually in this progressive mode. Physiologically, you should be thinking the same way. Like I should be able to perform additional functions. And that's not illogical. You think, wow, how can a 95-year-old be more functional than a 50-year-old? Well, a 95-year-old has 45 years more experience than a 50-year-old. It should have more function. Like a 95-year-old should actually have a much, much higher level of function than a 50-year-old, because there's 45 more years of experience, of training, of adaptability in this world. Okay, so that person should be 45 years more functional.
I love this, but I have to ask, okay, but what about, wrinkly skin and joint pain and all these things that are associated with aging? Are we not like inherently losing function as we age, or is our biochemistry declining as we age? Like, why is it that we all just socially accept that you will have less function as you get older and that you're going to, lose your youth or your beauty or whatever? Why are they so intertwined?
So you often hear me say, there's only ignorance and inaction are the only two causes of all dysfunction and death. Either you don't know what to do, or you don't do the things that you know you should do. Those are the two things. And so when you talk about saggy skin or reduced functionality, as you break those things down, what they basically mean is that you have there's unidentified functional requirements at the cellular level, and or the environmental flux, everything. So the human body and our existence, there's no such thing as homeostasis. Okay, there's no such thing as idling. Okay, you're always you're in the wake state,
Mm-hmm.
or you're in the sleeping state, you're in the fed state, or you're in the fasting state. You're either building muscle or you're breaking down muscle. You're either storing fat
Mm-hmm.
or you're metabolizing fat. So your body, there's no such thing as homeostasis. Okay, it is always some sort of change. Your body's always changing into something else. And it has to have some level of resistance. Without a resistance or purpose, it'll atrophy. And that goes all the way down, not just from you can't lay on a couch all day long. You got to go walk around and move your muscles. It goes right into your cells, even into your mitochondria, even into the inside of your cell, your organelles. All of those systems have a purpose and they have a function, and that purpose has to be continually flexed, if you will, in a cycle. So back to this concept of, okay, is it inevitable that you're
Going to decline.
And the answer is no. And so basically maintaining that functionality, and it's clearly, even if you look on the surface of things,
Mm-hmm.
okay, people who have inflammation and they have joint pain, well, there are people in this world that goes away, right? So clearly it's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street.
I mean, the whole year we've been talking about, people with ALS, dementia, Parkinson's, MS,
Yeah.
and they're maybe not how they were in their 20s and 30s, but they've turned the trajectory around from declining every day to seeing, tiny improvements and
Right.
starting to get their energy back and needing to take less naps.
Exactly.
And those are people with, serious diseases. So when we're talking about, health and restoring health,
Right.
does it mean that there's restoring health if there are imbalances, but then there's this next level of once you've attained this health or ideal level of function, this
Right.
perpetual health, this immortality concept is really just maintaining that. And you're saying
Absolutely.
that there's, a scientific backing here that's possible.
Well, so, and obviously you need to prioritize,
Mhm.
right? So the human body is a complex set of organs and systems. And so if you want to, take this immortality challenge
Mhm.
on, you need to look at the human body in an objective manner, and you need to prioritize certain functions. Okay. And both at the biochemical level, the physiological level, and at the purposefulness level. And so when you take a look at what is the ultimate thing that makes a human, and that is our brain structure and function.
Mhm.
Okay, that is where our thoughts reside. That's where our motivation comes in. That's where our identity is, in our brain. And then from the brain, we work on, okay, well, how do I keep the brain healthy? What does the brain need? Well, the brain doesn't go out and slay an animal, and the brain can't eat food for you. So you have to go provide the nutrition for your brain, right? It can't breathe oxygen, right? So who you are, the human body is fundamentally designed for our identity to basically maintain a healthy functioning brain.
Mhm.
And so we can measure that. But then we start breaking down what are the core components. So your heart has to work. You have to have a certain blood pressure and pulse rate, and it needs to be able to circulate nutrition to your brain and to the other organs of your body that are used to further provide that sustenance.
Mhm.
Your lungs, they have to be able to work. Your kidneys have to clear things. Your bowels have to work. So on. So each of these parts of the human body have a job to do. And then you go, okay, so what? And then you take each piece of that puzzle and you ask the question, what is it that allows the heart to do what it does? Like, what is the actual heart made of? Okay, there's cells, the myocytes. And so, it requires energy at the subcellular level. What are the core components that require that system to maintain itself? And that's at the biochemical level. And so as you go down this, you can identify very clearly it's the order of the body. And so fundamentally aging or fundamentally the barrier or the physics of time is entropy. Okay, fundamentally, what we're all fighting is entropy. Entropy is the tendency of all things to reach a level of randomness, right? And I often tell this analogy about
The bed making,
making
right?
your bed in the morning, right? Okay, you get up in the morning and your bed's a mess, right? And it looks like crap. And so you make your bed, but it takes energy. You are physically applying energy to make your bed, and it looks nice. Then all of a sudden, everything conspires to unmake that bed all day long. You sit on the edge of the bed, it gets wrinkled. Then what do you got to do? You got to make it again. Or you put your clothes on the bed, and so you're making the bed. The act of making the bed is creating order, okay, or it's restoring order.
Restoring order, yeah.
Right, and restoring order requires energy. And so, how do you perform that energy? Okay, as a human being, you're getting up and walking around, but the ability for you to make the bed means that you've eaten enough food, that your body has energy, and so as you break it down into those situations. So the same thing happens at the human body. Same thing with the heart. Okay, the heart is like a bed; it has to be constantly remade every day, or every hour, or every minute. It's constantly rebuilding itself. It's constantly making itself functional, and there's energy required to do that. And that energy comes from the combustion of hydrocarbons, and it goes. And so, as you work your way down, you have to start at the basics of saying, why can we even move in this world? Because we are these bioreactors, and then you build one step up. And the cool thing about the advanced technologies that we have now is that we can actually measure when things are not working properly. We can identify what components of this bioreactor are being underfed, and which components of this bioreactor have excess or toxicity, and those things can be restored.
What a time to be alive, right? Where we kind of have this check engine light, so to speak, where you can actually figure out now, you can do testing and figure out what things are not being maintained that need to be maintained and actually intervene. So aging, I love how you said it's entropy. It's it's lack of order, lack of maintenance of health. And entropy is just like a law of the universe, right? That things just go towards randomness.
Right. And if you do nothing, it's highly predictable. Okay. So you can actually I always do the example, if you take 100 Chevys and Fords and Dodge 1960 cars, and you just let them go, and you don't do anything. Okay. You don't change the oil, you don't change the tires, you don't whatever. There will be a highly reproducible timeline at a certain number of miles. The probability of this car will have a transmission failure, or this car will have a flat tire, or this car. And so the genetics of a Dodge versus a Ford versus a Chev is slightly different. So you may say, oh, well, the transmission in a Ford lasts 10,000 miles longer than a Chev, but the brakes
it's a different wearing down of parts, where some people might have dementia and some might have, Parkinson's or Right.
And so that gives you your genetic predisposition, right, of a different disease. And so this is where all the SNPs come in, and the 23andMe's and that kind of stuff. But the reality is, if you maintain a 1960s Chev or a 1960s Ford or a 1960s, Dodge, okay, all three of them can be 50 years later fully functional. Okay, each one has maybe slightly different maintenance requirements, but the maintaining the maintenance of function is irrelevant because you're monitoring it. And so if something's wrong with the brakes, you fix them. If something's wrong, and of course the human body isn't made of, rubber and iron. It's made of living material. So when something is broken in the human body, it's a biochemical restoration to fix it. Okay, obviously we talk about medicine where you get artificial limbs and things so you can actually physically replace certain parts with materials, but really the human body is capable of restoring and rebuilding and maintaining itself if it's provided the right materials.
It's so fascinating how something as science fiction-y as immortality can actually be broken down in a systematic way of restoring biochemistry. So you mentioned it's biochemistry, which is kind of the baseline level we are bioreactors and we eat food and use that food and convert it into different things.
Yeah.
So there's biochemistry, and then there's just physiological function, right?
Right.
Like being able to get up and move around. And then the purpose piece, which is, having, I feel like the purpose runs through all of it though, right? Because there's the biochemistry has purpose.
Without purpose, nothing happens.
Like your arm needs a reason to move.
Correct.
Right? So the purpose is kind of like the momentum or the energy behind all of
Correct.
this.
All three things are always omnipresent. Okay. Even we get down to, say, a subcellular organelle like a mitochondria, right? So a mitochondria, its job is to take carbon, acetyl-CoA, takes oxygen, burns it into carbon dioxide and water, and converts that energy into ATP energy.
That's what I was going for when I said we eat food and convert it to
but
this.
it doesn't do it by itself. It doesn't do it for no reason.
Yeah.
Okay. It has to have, so in order for the mitochondria to perform its function, obviously it needs the carbon source. It needs oxygen. Okay. So that's the biochemical part, but it also needs the physiology. It needs the active electron transport chain, which is fine. Like, so it needs that physical structure, but then it also needs a purpose. It needs work. Okay. Something in your body has to say, hey, I need ATP. Okay. Because if no one's asking for the ATP energy, okay, the mitochondria is not going to just make it out of the blue. Like, it's not, otherwise you just burn up in flames. Like, you just, like, you're not going to, so it's only going to perform the function that's being asked of it. So if the body needs 5 grams of ATP, it's going to make 5 grams. It's not going to make 10 grams. It's not going to make, okay. And so it's going to make what's asked of it. And then what you can do, if you exercise, you're saying, oh, if I don't exercise, my mitochondria only needs to make 5 grams. But if I exercise a lot, now it needs 10 grams. So I've put an extra purpose or demand. I've increased the purposeness of the mitochondria. And the mitochondria then says, well, I better adapt to a higher level of ATP production. So that's why you exercise. So someone who exercises a lot, their mitochondrial capacity is much higher, just like our busy person versus the non-busy person scenario. So your mitochondria will adapt to the demand or the purpose that is being placed towards, insofar as it can. So if you exercise a lot and don't eat, then the mitochondria can't actually perform the functions being asked of it because it doesn't actually have the materials to do the job.
So that's creating the environment for it to,
right.
for your muscles to get bigger. But if you don't feed them, they can't get bigger.
Correct.
So there's biochemical level and physiological.
Exactly.
level.
And the biochemical level is ground zero for human biochemistry. Okay. And the way we can know that is we have lots of situations where people are born with genetic diseases. So if you have a biochemical defect, so no amount, like, so these children that we treat with rhizomelic chondrodysplasia punctata, for example, they have a genetic mutation that prevents them from making plasmalogens. No amount of wishful thinking, no amount of physiotherapy, no amount of Zen-like mindfulness of saying, I'm going to, you can't will yourself away from an actual physical deficit that they can't make plasmalogens. Okay, so we know at the biochemical level, a biochemical deficiency will override any other attempt. Okay, like scurvy for vitamin C deficiencies. If you're vitamin D deficient, you get rickets. No amount of wishful thinking can get you out of a vitamin C deficiency
Which makes it so fundamental and
Correct.
foundational.
It's foundational. So number one, the biochemistry has to be there because that's fun. That is what the human organism is built on. And then from there, if the biochemistry is maintained, then you can start adding function. Then you can start pushing the system. And this is the problem with aging, or what we consider aging, is that we gradually stop pushing the advancement of function because we get good at what we do. We become lazy, or we become
complacent, maybe.
Complacent is the right word, right? We become set in our ways.
Yeah.
And there's a psychological component of that that says, oh, I don't want to work so hard in my life. I've put all this life into my stress. I just want to retire and just enjoy the rest of it. Well, that is just, accepting your death, because the things that kept you alive, getting a job, getting a relationship, getting a house, doing all the things, those things created motivational force in your world. And so you need to replace those things. And that's one of the problems with the association of aging with reduced function is as people get older, the world kind of discriminates, like ageism, basically saying, you're too old for that. You're too old to think that. You shouldn't be doing
Yeah.
that. So we kind of influence people into
It's a
reducing their own function, which in fact they should be the opposite. As you get older, you should be pushing your goals and objectives even more, because fundamentally you have actually more capacity to do more things because you have greater knowledge and greater experience base to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's one of the things that I just can't quite understand why we've all been told that, aging is bad and life is going to get, your body's not going to work as well. You're not going to have as many opportunities.
In Canada, they have this medical assistance in aging, in death,
Mhm.
right? Where people can. So this whole concept of medical suicide is again another this pressure on humans to don't try too hard. Don't aspire to too much. Aspire to a little, but not too much. I think it's funny. It's kind of ingrained in our
Do you think that
psyche.
when some people achieve a big dream or get a huge award or something they've been chasing, how they often find that they get depressed? Is that because of a lack of like this motivating purpose is gone?
Absolutely, yeah. They get this letdown. They get this aimlessness, right?
Mhm.
It's yeah, absolutely. People. And so one of the parts of this whole concept of immortality is that you got to set goals for yourself that take 1,000 years to achieve. You can't set 10-year goals or 5-year goals. You got to live like you'll die tomorrow, but you have to plan like you'll live for 1,000 years. And so therefore you've created a purposefulness and you've created an agenda that is fundamentally unreachable in today's day and age, but
Mhm.
it's something that you never ever give up on. And people that have longevity typically have that type of very forward mindsets.
Mhm. So let's break down what it actually takes to achieve perpetual health. So the
Right.
foundational level is biochemistry.
Yeah.
How do you maintain, healthy, strong biochemistry?
So that's the core, basically human bioengineering.
Mhm.
Okay. Because the human body does require a lot of ingredients. People think, well, they're amino acids, and there's a bunch of vitamins that we require. There's a bunch of nutrition that we require. But these cofactors and biochemical intermediates are critical. They're not just the body has resilience. So a lot of times you get a lot of these things in your regular food supply, and those will sustain you for certain years of your life, but not for indefinite years. The biochemical requirement of immortality is significantly larger than the biochemical requirement for basic life, because you're not interested in how do I keep the bare minimum of survival. You're interested in how do I maintain a biochemical reserve capacity in excess of my current demand so that as I expand my functional demands, as I try to learn a new task or I
Mhm.
try to physically perform a new task, that my body actually has the nutritional components to actually execute what I'm asking of it. And then you can measure that. So advanced biochemical, so we use the ion cyclotron technology that measures thousands and thousands of biochemistry molecules. So the question is you can identify when certain systems are failing. Many people think, well, the methyltransferase system, right? They'll measure homocysteine. We actually have a lot of biomarkers in human health. It's not outrageous. Like we've actually been studying them for years and years and years. Like your homocysteine should be in a certain level. Like your total cholesterol should be in a certain level. Your, plasmalogens should be in a certain level. So we actually know these numbers. Most people don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. And your body is quite robust. So you can actually abuse it quite extensively. And it has backup systems and it'll maladapt. Okay, there's usually more than one way to get a job done at the biochemical level, but the option 2 and option 3 are not your optimal vitality methods. So your body's designed to keep you alive. Okay. Like it's
It'll
like,
cut corners.
right. Well, because
Yeah.
it doesn't know what you're going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
It doesn't know if you're going to have a pineapple salad or if you're going to have a burger. It doesn't know. So
Yeah.
it's got to have all these options available for it. So it's going to continually adapt. It just has no idea what's this crazy person going to do to me today, and it's going to have to adapt to it, right? And that's what it does, right? So that's the core. So you measure that, and then at the second phase is the physiological part.
Mhm.
We also know what a heart is supposed to do. Okay, a heart has a job to do. We know what a functioning lung does. Most importantly, the brain, though. Okay, we have really good advanced technology to measure not just the structure of the brain, like is the brain shrinking? Is the brain components have the right compositions to maintain its function? We also can measure the function of the brain. How is the functional connectivity? What is the structural connectivity? So these things we can measure, and we know what a healthy functioning brain should look like, and we know what a healthy functioning brain should act like.
Mhm.
And when we know those pieces of information, we can change and adapt our environment such that we achieve those high levels of functions. And as we monitor it, it maintains it. So immortality is very simply, maintaining today's function tomorrow indefinitely.
Mm.
Okay. It's not about living for 500 years. It's about living 501,
One day at a
one day
time.
at a time.
Yeah.
Um,
It's somehow both extremely simple and also very complex to me, because I'm thinking about how you would maintain physiological function and biochemical function and monitor all these things. And does it mean that the protocol for optimizing biochemical health would be, super complicated and vary over time? Or is it actually are there core systems where it can be a little more standardized?
It's core systems, and it's actually really not that complicated. Okay.
Mhm.
You know what's complicated is driving an automobile that has a gas tank that has 1 cup of fuel in it.
Mhm.
That's complicated. Okay. So if you have to constantly fill up 1 cup of fuel, if your car can only
That
last,
sounds really bad.
right? And so you're saying, oh my God, I have 1 cup of reserve in my gas tank, right? So I got to be really careful of how I drive, when I drive, and I'm filling it all the time.
Mm.
But if you have a gas tank that has 100 gallons in it, okay,
You got freedom.
you have freedom, right? And so the biochemistry of your body is the same way. Like you can have excess reserve capacity, okay, that will allow excess functionality. And there are clearly, when we look at age, because and we talk about disease itself is actually extremely informative, because human disease is like looking for breaks in the castle wall. Okay, human disease is what tells us
What's weak?
what are the areas of weakness. Where can the walls break down? So if you have ALS, for example, we talk about ALS. Here's a clear example of how glutamate excitotoxicity, okay, the inability to handle glutamate, okay, can cause motor neuron degeneration. Or we take a look at Parkinson's and we say, okay, here is a situation where how certain toxins can affect the substantia nigra and the dopamine containing systems. What's cool about these diseases, though, is that we know all the animal research that we've done, you can completely prevent Parkinson's. Okay, you can have an animal system that you give an animal a worse toxin than any human is going to get at doses no human would ever be exposed to, and you can completely prevent the dopamine neurons from being degenerated. Okay, so we know how to protect those neurons. We know how to maintain. So we talk about protection, but it's actually maintaining those neuron functions in the presence of a stress. So when you take a look at a large human population, okay, obviously there's going to be randomness. Most people won't be exposed to some toxin that specifically targets your dopamine cells. Okay, so
Yeah.
most people won't get Parkinson's, but a certain random group of the population will experience that toxin. And the human body typically doesn't have normal reserve capacity to deal with that level of toxin. So that person will get Parkinson's because on average, the body doesn't normally create excess reserve capacity without some underlying purpose. But if you understand Parkinson's or you understand demyelinating diseases like multiple sclerosis, you can understand which are those weaknesses,
And give it reserve capacity.
you can get the reserve capacity in advance. So we know this, and so we can measure. So not only can we measure disease, we can measure reserve capacity as well. And so we can actually say, okay, is my tank full or is my tank empty? I can run on an empty tank for quite a while, as long as I don't get some random negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the problem with aging, chronological age, is that the longer that you live,
more likely you're going to get exposed to something.
correct,
And that's just this whole entropy idea.
exactly.
Wow.
And so then you just need to plan ahead and actually create that reserve capacity and then monitor
Mm-hmm.
that functionality is being maintained. And when you identify certain areas of functionality that are not being maintained, biochemically, there are usually solutions to all those things.
And same even, I'm thinking with just like physiologically, right? Like there are some core, like the push, the pull,
Yeah.
hinge, or whatever. There's certain movements.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do the most complicated, every year you're on a crazy different supplement protocol and crazy different workouts.
Yeah.
It's really just understanding the core systems
Correct.
and
Exactly.
maintaining.
You have to understand your core systems. Now, if you like crazy workouts,
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fun. Like if that's fun for you, do that. Is it necessary? Probably not. But just because it's necessary doesn't mean you can't do fun things.
Mhm.
Like, so if you want to work out, you just make sure you provide that level of capacity. And so, and we talk about this not being fantastical. This
Mhm.
is actually real, doable now. Okay. And my own brain samples, okay, my own brain scans, my own physiology. I'm a 55-year-old man. I've reversed well over 15 to 20 years of my own brain's aging from
And
statistical
how did you
analysis.
know that though?
That's where advanced MRI comes in. So the nice thing about human aging is humans are so obsessed with their life and death. We have tracked every possible variable of age. So we actually know, we know the decline rate of cholesterol. We know the decline rate of testosterone. We know the decline rate of plasmalogen. We know the decline rates of all these things. The problem is most of these studies are done with scientists living in a glass tower, looking at humans moving around, living and dying. The problem what most everyday people don't understand is that these epidemiological studies are only valid in naive populations. Okay, the association between these variables and outcomes are only valid if the people in the study are unaware that they're being studied. So once you start actively intervening in these outcomes, those epidemiological numbers don't work anymore. And so we can measure these things, but it's back to the function. So for me, you can use advanced MRI. So we know brain volumes should change. The thickness of your cortex thins with age. Well, and it just typically doesn't go back. So for me, my cortical thickness has returned back to a 40-year-old.
So you were able to measure your cortical thickness,
Correct.
And the first scan was thinner than the second?
Yeah, and thinner than the third, and I'll be doing it again, be thinner than the fourth. And so my brain has continued to regrow itself back to its a youthful state, and it'll maintain it. Like obviously, your skull has a barrier, right? So you can't get much more brain area than your skull. So, but the point is that that's actually why the brain is also very helpful to understand. It's about returning it. We talk about restorative health, but we want to restore it. But then actually, once you've restored health, you want to perpetuate. So that's why we have restorative health and perpetual health. At first, you want to restore yourself to a healthy state, and then you want to be able to have that healthy state in perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
Yeah.
So the programs that you're developing are for people to basically track and monitor and maintain their health.
Yeah. And so we've already identified these core systems, and we'll be able to fine tune it even further as time goes on. So now with more and more advanced measurements and more advanced imaging technologies. So we've like the biochemical reserve capacity, biochemical restoration capabilities that we have now are already doing amazing things in individuals with neurological disease and muscle wasting type diseases. And now the goal is it's a triage, right? You deal with the big issues first, and then you'll deal subsequently with less and less priority issues. Because we don't need we don't need all human functions to live forever. Clearly, a menopausal woman is not dying. Like you have, so reproductive capability is not something that you need forever, right? And so, and when it's not something that determines your longevity, for example.
Interesting. So this notion that we are just programmed for death is wrong.
Yeah, it's one of the worst falsehoods. There's two things that are probably on my list of greatest pet peeves. One would be this programmed cell death concept, and the other one would be aging as a disease, like try to label aging as a disease.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with this programmed death is that it feels so compelling. It looks so obvious. And just because it looks obvious doesn't mean it's real. Take plants, for example. Okay, we grow wheat for bread. But you know what? If you mow a wheat crop, it never goes to head. It never gives you a wheat crop. So you can actually create perpetual plants by pruning them. And so
yeah.
And so if you think of anything that's programmed, like a 90-day gestational period for like a wheat plant feels pretty fixed in time. But reality, that plant is adapting to changes in the sunlight and changes to the environment, and its biochemistry is changing. And as its biochemistry changes, it's changing its next objective. And so programmed death in humans, it appears to be programmed because the association with chronological age
mm-hmm.
under large populations is pretty accurate. If it wasn't accurate, life insurance companies wouldn't be making a lot of money on their actuarial. Like they're very highly predictive. Okay, we can predict with quite high accuracy when most people with dementia will die. Okay, the average lifespan of a diagnosis is around 4.5 years. Now, some people will be longer, some people less. That's the power of statistics, and it appears programmed, but it's not programmed. The human body is actually adaptive, and what it does is it successfully adapts to lower levels of state. So people talk about your gene methylation rates and other types of aging clocks. Well, those are putting the cart in front of the horse, if you will. The body is shutting down because you're asking less and less and less of it. And so same thing like NAD levels going down. Well, your NAD levels are going to go down when you don't have any reason for them. And so your body's not going to create stuff that it doesn't need. So that's the one. And so aging as a disease itself, that's again another one. Aging is not a disease. It's apathy and entropy. Like it basically, the body just doesn't care. People don't pay attention to it. And a good example, you take a longest living individuals in their hundreds, when a 110-year-old person dies, every part of their body doesn't shut down instantly, right? They'll either die from heart failure or lung failure or something, right? So when the heart fails, but their fingers were still moving and their eyes were still working. So clearly, you can't say you're programmed to die
because the whole thing doesn't shut off at one time.
The whole thing doesn't shut off at one time. Like it's a randomness, right? And so there's going to be some, so-called canary in the coal mine that dies off first. And when you lose one core level of functionality, then the whole system crashes around it. But there's no way to predict on an individual level. At a population level, those predictive powers become quite high. So we can actually, this leads us to the idea of immortality. Okay, so we talked about all these things. We can measure health, we can measure function. But we can actually use these advanced statistical tools to our advantage, okay? Because we always use these tools, these 5-year probability of mortality. We call them a positive predictive value. Like we can predict a future event based upon current circumstances, right? And we can, like I can look at your bank account and I say, you're spending
this much
more than you're making.
This much at capacity.
I can predict when you're going to run out of money, right?
Yeah.
And so we have good statistics ability to predict that. And so we do that biochemically as well. We can actually look at your your probability of getting a disease. And so this is where the plasmalogens were discovered, right? So using this advanced technology, we were looking at individuals that had Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And we looked at the blood analysis of people with dementia versus people that had normal cognition. We identified that these plasmalogens were lower in the blood of individuals with dementia. And as we did further and further levels of analysis, we could actually predict when a plasmalogen deficient person would get dementia in the future based upon their date today. Well, we can use that advanced technology in reverse. We can actually predict health as much as we can predict death. And so in terms of if you want to get into the geekiness of immortality, we can actually measure your 5-year probability of death because we know what we actually can measure that. And
that's really scary to me.
And so you can take a blood sample and you can say, okay, based upon my blood sample now, my probability that I will die in the next 5 years is less than 1%. Okay, then I'll check it again next year. And so the quantitative power of immortality is basically simply your 5-year prediction of death, or whatever number you want, 3-year, 10-year. But and then each year, if something changes, you can know if that's changed. So say, for example, my 5-year, like the lowest, because you can step in front of a bus or whatever else, right? So I say my 5-year probability of death is 3%. And next year, it's 3%. The year after that, it's 3%. Then all of a sudden, it goes to 10%. And I go, oh, what the hell happened? Why did my risk of death jump from 3% to 10%? Something happened in the course of this 12-month period. And then I can look into that and say, oh, well, all of a sudden my homocysteine levels are high, or all of a sudden some system of my body has now not worked properly. And so we can actually identify those situations long, long in advance. Okay, which is why we call this prodrome science. Like it's the ability to look at the prodromes of things, that which comes before. And we can use all of this advanced technology, but we just need to flip the script, if you will, on it and use it
for health.
Use it for health.
And that's why all of next year we're going to be focusing on health.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the immortality of the brain, how to build an immortal heart, an immortal kidney, an immortal lung, immortal biochemistry. And basically all we're talking about is how can first of all, ask the question objectively, is there any reason why the heart can't maintain its pumping capacity forever? And there really isn't any barrier to that. We can identify which systems fail. We can restore them. So
it's so fascinating. I feel like all of our past conversations are, at least my goal was to show that it's possible to get better.
Right.
You could have this horrible diagnosis and it's possible that each day's not going to get worse, that you can get better,
right,
whatever that means. And now it's kind of this whole next stage too, no matter what age you're listening to this, it's possible to feel better tomorrow.
Exactly. And look, there's priorities in this world. Like we have family, we have loved ones, okay? And if someone has dementia or multiple sclerosis, that takes priority. Like when someone actually has an active illness, you want to restore that individual.
Absolutely.
And those individuals are the ones that typically have the highest level of motivation because, quite frankly, we live our lives, okay? And we don't know, it's kind of our health and our disease is somewhat random. Some adverse event occurs and we've lost something, and then we're now motivated to regain that. And so clearly that is something that requires priority in individuals. But for the rest of us, okay, we can start looking ahead now and say, okay, let's take this restorative health model one step further. And basically the adding restorative health to existing health is how you get to perpetual health. And we're now at that point where we can actually really start applying that. Well, I've been applying it now for several years. And the objective data is there for anyone to watch it.
And not only have you regrown areas of your brain, but, the amount I've seen you accomplish in 1 year alone. I mean, are you noticing that your function and your cognitive capacity has improved? over time.
Exactly. Well, and of course, as our businesses grow,
Yeah.
the demands of me to be involved in manufacturing and in, all the health related issues, and we have these rare disease programs, so I get all these new rare disease cases that are incredibly mentally stimulating. So
Mhm.
yes, absolutely, mental capacity for me, my ability to think through solutions, has basically reached its max in my life. Um, and my physiology, my strength, and my recovery of my physical recovery in my 50s is way better than it was in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And so,
So inspiring. And we'll get into more of the details, but I think this conversation is so important to just anyone listening to just kind of take a pause
yeah,
and realize that a lot of the narratives that we've been told might not be true.
yeah,
You can maybe you're not just inevitably going to lose
right.
function.
And how fun is this?
And that's what I'm saying,
You know,
because I see you're obviously older than me, and
yeah,
I see you have way more energy than me and stamina. And so I now have this goal of getting to that
yeah,
level, right? Of improving and expanding and not seeing, this kind of peak and drop off, but just kind of,
exactly.
keep getting better.
Well, it just opens so many horizons,
Absolutely.
and so you just kind of, it's quite frankly, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
And it's let's push the limits and enjoy ourselves while we're doing it. And it is, and the spin-off events,
Mhm.
like all this technology we're developing and all these applications that we're doing, they help us in all these other areas as well. The biggest thing is it's not theoretical. Okay, we're not talking about extending the life of a fruit fly. We're not talking about extending the life of a worm or a
Mhm.
rodent. We're talking actual human beings. These are things that humans can do and humans can measure objectively. Not You don't have to wait 50 years to know whether or not you're restoring your health, or whether or not you're on a trajectory to immortality. Okay, that can be done now. Okay, and so for on my personal situation, okay, when I started this program, the first, and you're going to see the biggest effects in the first couple of years. So the first two brain scans showed the biggest change, right? And then little less and little less, which is what should happen as I reach my, back to my optimal health of my
And your
brain.
skull's like, hey,
Yeah,
we can't
exactly.
get a bigger brain. We're at
Exactly.
capacity here.
Got to exactly, but and same thing with your heart, your lungs. Like there's not really, like there's really just function. It either
Mhm.
works or doesn't work. Like there's really no. It has is as long as I can get up in the morning and I can run, I can lift weights, I can do the things. There's really no more than that than I can do. Right. So it's performing the function that I'm asking of it to the
Mhm.
fullest capacity that I'm asking of it. And so, and that's kind of where you're going.
It's so, I never thought I would be having a science based conversation on immortality. But, now that we're talking about it, I realize it's really cool.
It's not that crazy,
And it's not that crazy.
you know. So
So we'll see as we have more and more conversations if
yeah,
we're
over the next 100
having
years,
exactly we have the same energy and passion 100 years from
you know,
now. That would be
our
amazing.
set might change a little bit here and there over the years.
Maybe we're levitating or
Yeah,
like
well,
floating or
exactly.
something.
We'll have
But
that time lapse, like an old movie, right?
totally. Or
Those,
how, like a tree growing. But I think of what you said,
oh, that's hilarious. Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
when I think about a big, strong, like amazing tree,
yeah,
I think that it's only getting better with age. We don't look at a really mature tree and think,
yeah.
eh. We
Yeah,
think, wow.
yeah, we should plant a sapling, right? And just and have this conversation every year as the
Totally.
hilarious.
Well, thank you so
You're
much.
very
This is so
welcome.
inspiring. I'm excited for next year. I'm excited for us to kind of shift our focus to health and what does it mean to be immortal and kind of break down these systems, the biochemistry, the heart, the brain. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's nice to actually call it what it is. Okay, people talk about anti-aging. They talk about
I hate
longevity.
anti-aging.
I know it's a negative thing, right? And talk about longevity, but really we're talking immortality. Like, we really should be calling it what it is. Okay, it's perpetual health. It's being able to maintain function indefinitely. And I think it's time for us to actually just call it what it is and be able to have a conversation openly about it.
Absolutely. It's really exciting.
Well, thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing you at A4M.
A4M is going to be quite the show. I'm giving a presentation on the cognition, aging brain and cognition on the 12th, and then I'm giving a presentation on the 14th on restorative neurology. So we're actually showing how to restore the human brain and measure it. So
wow, I'm sure we'll get some clips of that to share. I can't wait.
I'll see you there.
See you there.